Welcome back, Cherry Blossom family. Bringing you another episode of What the Hemp Wednesday. It is Wednesday, and it is time. It's been a whole week, believe it or not, right? So I'm Derek. This is Cherry Blossom CBD, and we're bringing hemp news to you from around the world and around the country. Now, we've been with you on the East Coast for a couple weeks now. It's time to give the West Coast guys a little love. So we're going to start, though, staying right here at home with the FDA. The FDA has rejected full spectrum CBD as a dietary supplement. Federal regulators have said no, like they're not doing it. The FDA announced last week in letters to CBD makers Charlotte's Web and Irwin Naturals, which sought agency clearance to market this extract as a new dietary supplement. The FDA pointed out two reasons for the rejection. CBD is the active ingredient in a pharmaceutical drug and therefore should not be available over the counter. Okay, and insufficient data about CBD safety and efficacy. Now, a little unusual coming from the FDA saying that insufficient data because they are basically the data gatherers for all of us in that way. Charlotte's Web sent a response to the FDA that full spectrum extract is distinct from pharmaceutical CBD, which is an isolate that does not contain other cannabinoids. Very true, very true. And Charlotte's Web basically has a press release saying this business would be unaffected, but calls on Congress to intervene and designate hemp-derived CBD as a dietary supplement. And I think some of the reasons are not because I don't think anyone can really figure out what is technically hemp-derived CBD. I think they know that it's hemp-derived, but then hemp-derived CBD could also be Delta-8 or THCO or some of these other things, and they're probably not wanting to address all of those things at once. I think the state and federal regulators are probably feeling pretty overwhelmed at where it is right now, but we're going to get to more of that later. We will end that segment with a bill to do that, to intervene and designate hemp-derived CBD is basically pending in the Senate, but no vote has been cast on that yet. So, and now let's get out to the West Coast. Hemp cultivators are facing water shortages, and it's not just hemp cultivators. There's also all types of farmers. Almond farmers, I would expect your almond lattes or your almond blueberry smoothies to go up next year because farmers are having to make decisions about water. I think this comes back to farmers not being able to get water rights or their water shortages. We know the West Coast is this time of year, from about August on to about November, they're on fire, and it's hot. We all know they've had water shortages for decades now. We're still growing, but they're saying this might have an effect on hemp and other cannabinoid plants. Said the water shortages are contributing to falling hemp acreage nationwide as farmers look to crops with less price volatility. That is one. Hemp acreage for 2021 could be down significantly from 2020. Now, I think what we're saying is we're starting to get a glimpse of like how climate change is maybe affecting crop growth, not just on the West Coast, but all across the country. And we may be looking at somewhat of a new normal. But Matt Cyrus, a farmer at Sisters, Oregon, who elected not to plant hemp in 21, said cannabis can thrive in a hot, dry conditions, which really kind of helps that crop in that hemp uses about a third as much water as a hay crop or some of these other crops, and probably about 33 times less per acre as almonds. So there is hope for that in a sense that hemp doesn't require as much water. So that brings hope to the West Coast, but things are going to start happening here on the East Coast too, because it's been raining too much. I don't know if you live on the East Coast, but it's been raining quite a bit. This week with the hurricanes and tropical storms back to back, it's really been coming down. Hemp farmers from Kentucky to Florida and across the Midwest have experienced an overabundance of moisture this summer. And overabundance of moisture leads to things like disease and pests and things like that. The plants do adapt, but sometimes they do. It changes the THC levels and thresholds in those particular plants, and sometimes the cannabinoid profile. And if you're someone who's growing, let's say, cherry wine, and you're kind of betting on your history that cherry wine produces a certain amount of certain cannabinoids, and it's heavy in this and heavy in that. But just like these viruses are adaptable, plants are adaptable too, and they mutate to adapt to the environment that they're in. This is why you can grow different strawberries maybe on the West Coast than you can on the East Coast, adaptable to the environment. So ongoing variability, extreme weather from one end of the country could lead ultimately to shifts in the agricultural landscape. Now, we don't know what that means. That means our growing area is going to change. We don't know, but right now, we're just keeping an eye on all this and the excessive moisture on the East Coast and the lack thereof on the West Coast. Now, keeping out west, Oregon, we talked about this a little while back, but Oregon is now going to be do double testing for THC to root out illegal marijuana. So what has apparently been happening is that farmers have been getting licenses to grow hemp and using those hemp licenses to actually grow marijuana. I think the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission, I said I think because they changed their name to that, and I don't think there were that before, and the Oregon Department of Agriculture just got together to inspect licensed hemp fields across the state to ensure that registered hemp growers are not growing marijuana instead. And Oregon is now the first state to send marijuana regulators to hemp grows. With what is going on in Southern Oregon with the cartel takeover cannabis growing through the guise of hemp, our role, says Steve Marks, is to be able to enforce that is all incredibly important. But basically, he just wants to be able to enforce to make sure that marijuana growers are not getting shortchanged because hemp growers are taking advantage of things that they don't have a license to take advantage of. There are 723 registered growers in Oregon right now on a total of 6,500 acres, indoor and outdoor production. That said, through the 134 farms that have been inspected, no THC, no illegal marijuana growers have been reported or discovered yet. So I think what we're seeing here, it kind of leads into our next and final topic today. And I want to highlight something. I want to highlight an editor with the Hemp Industry Daily. Her name is Kristen Nichols, and she has really gone and written an editor's notebook this week and talking about hemp and marijuana are kind of at a war here. Hemp and THC, CBD and THC. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about Washington State and how they're making changes to allow hemp-derived THC in their dispensary system. Now, this is causing some problems, and I'm going to tell you that to the point where someone wrote a letter into this young lady, and it was from a fellow person in the hemp industry. It wasn't like, some sort of regulator, but they're saying there's assault on legal cannabis, and assault on legal cannabis they're talking about is with hemp. Like, it's crazy, but these two plants are interconnected. They're cousins. The only thing is one is higher in THC and one is higher in CBD, but botanically they're pretty much the same. So it doesn't make sense. It does now, and I see the frustration because one is highly overregulated and one is highly underregulated. There's not enough information. And they're kind of letting people do whatever the heck they want, and people are sort of chasing the money. Now, we think this is all just about California, and it's not. Okay, and in quoting Ms. Nichols, unnecessary battle lines are being drawn because one version of this plant, as I said, is ridiculously over-regulated, while the other varieties could use some basic health and safety oversight. That is true. Now, this has been going on for some years, and this is not going to happen in California. And her prediction is going to get a little worse here on the East Coast. And granted, there's all these states. It's not just like 3 states that cover the West Coast. There's about like 10 to 16 states here that comprise the Eastern Seaboard. Now, what they're saying here is, like she said, the East Coast is next, where hemp businesses, unlike the West Coast, preceded THC businesses. So we can't grow, in most places, we can't grow THC varieties here. We can only grow CBD heavy varieties. And those industries are now the forefront on the East Coast, and they're established, and they're entrenched, and they're like, hey, we don't want, and I think some operators are really much looking forward to being able to do both, sell both, especially if you're like a retail operation. But if you're just a grower, I don't know, in places like North Carolina where there's CBD only dispensaries and they're flourishing, retailers are already talking about pivoting to marijuana, but marijuana does come with hefty price tags and like licensing and regulatory controls and things like that. So I'm going to bring her opinion here is that a unified cannabis industry would solve all these problems. Business owners need to push for regulators to stop separating low and high THC. It only sets up incentives to cut corners from operators. Very true. Good point. We need to push for regulators to push for lower taxes all around. Cannabis, and THC cannabis is taxed way heavily, because people they see it's a cash cow. They're trying to, and they're locking it in here with liquor and stuff. I don't know. All this is kind of strange to people who've been of the culture for some time. But also push for easy to follow safety protocols, especially for cannabinoid producers and extractors, growers, everyone. Let's free hemp producers working on grain and fiber products from all over the region and start treating these food producers more like farmers and not pharmaceutical giants. A unified cannabis industry across the THC spectrum could make this happen. Ms. Nichols, thank you for your opinion, and I think you are right on point. So that's food for thought as we end today. We'll be back on Friday with another version of Talking Terps. I guess Fight All this week. And of course, next Wednesday with another version of What the Hemp Wednesday. Hope you enjoyed what we had to bring to you today. I know a lot of you on the East Coast are like, some of this West Coast information, it all impacts us. We're all one big industry and we're all growing together. So I just want to bring you perspectives from around the country again and around the world. Well, until then, we'll see you next week, but we would certainly appreciate it if you share this with anyone you know. Please like, subscribe, share, and always comment. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next week.